Hello, and welcome to this conversation. I'm Jenna O'Keefe. I graduated from Mailman in 2013, and I'm currently a PhD student in humanitarian health at Johns Hopkins University. As part of my global health experience, I was fortunate enough to work for 6 months in 2012 in the Eastern DRC with Rebuild Hope for Africa, also known as RHA, a Congolese NGO that provides humanitarian aid for refugees, internally displaced persons, and vulnerable groups. In addition to my own practicum, RHA has hosted 18 students over the last decade and a half, and it certainly ranks up there as one of PFMH's most dedicated partners. Here with me today, I have Gang Karume, Executive Director of RHA. The contributions that Gang and RHA have made to the program and the experience of our students has been immeasurable. We also have here with us Les Roberts, Professor Emeritus in PopFam. His classes and life lessons have been a treasured feature of the experience of so many PFMH and global health alumni since he joined the program. Les, maybe to start off the conversation, can you tell us a little bit about the history of your work with Gang?
Sure. Before I was an academic, I actually was the director of health policy at the International Rescue Committee. And in 1999, I went out essentially to teach people how to measure water consumption, but ended up doing a series of mortality surveys over the years that passed. And Gang was the logistician for IRC there in Bukavu. When there was a vicious attack in Kisangani, while I and my local partner were there, and my local partner, Charles Labula, was not willing to get in a canoe and go down to the capital, down the Congo River, Gang organized for MSF in an emergency picking up of their people to take us along. The next year, I ended up in prison because I wouldn't give up my satellite camera. And the police chief down in Moba was this really badass guy who had executed 40 or 50 people at point blank in the street. Like, he was seen as this really awful person. And somehow Gang called someone that called him and scared him into releasing me. So early on, I became really dependent on Gang for sort of logistical support, like getting me out of jail. But as time went on, he actually played a bigger and bigger role. In particular, we did a survey in the Central African Republic in 2009, and Gang happened to be working there at the time. And he convinced us to add to our questionnaire about human rights abuses, are there any other problems that you and your neighbors are experiencing that we haven't asked about? And it turns out that more people were kidnapped in CAR, children were kidnapped in CAR than were abducted by soldiers or raped or killed. And since that time, Gang has sort of been telling me what to do, and I just shut up and send them students, and it works out.
No less.
Gang, maybe we can hear your side next. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that RHA does in Eastern DRC? And how did you find yourself in the position of hosting 18 Mailman students over the last decade and a half?
Rebuild for Africa has been made out of kind of revolt from many people, DRC citizens who are working abroad as international staff, just wondering, why are we supporting people elsewhere and we are unable to support our own? And then I started Rebuild for Africa. I don't know if I would say luckily enough or unfortunately enough, most of the people we started with, they got jobs elsewhere and they just flee. They just left me behind and stranded with RHA, and I timidly started with non-food items, sector interventions, then moved along, starting getting more and more partners. Then we extended the field of our operations from out of South Kivu. We went to Maniema, we went to North Kivu. Now, RHA is in Kinshasa. In Kasai, we are actually active in 7 provinces out of the 36 of that DRC counts today. I mean, on top of non-food items distribution, shelter, we very often get funds from UNICEF on water, sanitation, and hygiene. We also get funds from other donors to make protection work. And finally, where Colombia come in, it is in research. Uh, the idea and the taste for research really come from Les. When we last met in 2009, when he said in CAR, and he just said, why don't you go and replicate this UN 1612 survey into DRC? I said, why not? And then, well, okay, let's come in, and then we move from there on. And let's say that at the beginning, when we were in IRC together, I remember Les was giving me hard time because all my stuff could not keep time. And that was just making Les very annoyed. And later on, we got to understand that he's an American, he's speaking on time. And then, yes, we got from there.
Maybe you both can tell us a little bit about some of the projects that Mailman students worked on. So maybe Gang, we can start off with you.
We made studies where we are trying to understand why schools were being burned, why the armed groups were destroying schools, why they could prevent children from attending schools. We made a study with, if I remember, with Cyril Benuna. Then we made a study on, we are studying events, mortality, births, deaths, remember, and arrivals and departures. And that is yours with Frank, Jen. Remember in Fiji, when we're studying the sequence in Fiji. That is you and Frank, I think. Then we made also attacks on health. Then we worked on the World Bank project on access to healthcare for refugees, IDPs, and locals. I think we did also an ethnographic survey in North Kivu. Then we talked about access to formal and informal education. Then we did UN 1612.
Les and Gang, what do you think the practicum added to the educational experience for the students that had the opportunity to work with RHA?
So it was really lovely that these different students got to explore so many different techniques and tools. And what was really great was doing it with a local partner. We're in an era where local NGOs are becoming the main servants of the humanitarian endeavor as the international NGOs get more and more risk adverse, at least in the most dangerous places. So to be able to work with a local NGO and see the power and advantages of that, I think that was just so great. There were security concerns, and what was great was RHA had a really sophisticated network and way of protecting those students. So that was unusual.
Yeah, and the last experience that we just finished in CAR, looking at the result that we've done with the mortality survey in CAR, for example, and the amount of money that we used for it, and that just get compared to how much money would an international organization do, for example. And again, looking at the clusters we visited and how we could sneak into those armed groups using their own motorcycles, renting their own motorcycles. Those are things that an international organization cannot afford doing. This is something that national organizations can easily navigate. I think this is the most important thing, to just shift into the mind and say, there is a place in the world where things can really be the opposite of what they're expecting. I think that is among the major lessons that they've got.
And maybe to add that to that, from the student perspective, I can also honestly say that the learning I was able to do with RHA, it really changed the course of my life. And what was amazing about working with Gang and Les is that as a student looking to learn, you were getting practical experience in research skills like study design, data collection, and analysis. But you also had opportunities to be involved in the implementation side, delivering services to populations affected by crisis. And that experience working with RHA was really golden in that it bridged the gap between theory that you were learning in the classroom at Columbia and practice, which is kind of boots on the ground and can look really different from the theory that you learn sitting in the classroom. And then I think for students as well, there's something so important about learning from a local NGO that has its roots in the community, that knows the history, knows the culture, knows the context so much better than anyone coming from outside. And this is important, as you both said, not only because it allows better safety and security for anyone working with the organization, whether it's the Congolese staff or the students from Colombia, but it also allows us to deliver better services to the people that need them. We've heard in this conversation and other conversations in the series that localization is really the future of humanitarian aid. It's sort of what we should be doing all along. And Gang and Les were really pioneers in that. They understood from the beginning and have really pushed to change the model of humanitarian aid, whether it was through challenging funding mechanisms or questioning who is in positions of power when working with affected communities. And as a student, to be able to see sort of the future of humanitarian aid, before the rest of the world had kind of caught on, it really changed my perspective, and it's really changed how I do my work. More than 10 years later, after I graduated from the program at Columbia, I'm continuing that work as a PhD student. And I still have the chance to work with Gang and Les in different capacities, and I'm still learning from them years later. And then maybe the last point I'll make is that the other thing working with Gang and Les is really that it's just a whole lot of fun. I mean, these guys were brothers in another life, and you really feel like you have a sense of community, that you're looking out for each other, that you're trying to do good work, but you can also have a lot of fun along the way. And I think that sometimes can get lost in the heaviness of doing humanitarian response. And I think seeing that laughter and that joy that they bring to the work also made a really deep impression on me and to the other students that got to work with them. And it really is sort of a connection and a lifelong sort of learning experience that we've all been able to have, thanks to the great work that you both have done. Gang, can you tell us a little bit about what you and your colleagues at RHA, what you all took away from the experience of working with the students and having that connection with an American university like Columbia in the United States?
We gained a lot. We gained a lot, and the biggest thing that we gained into that was we learned from Columbia University students and Les himself how to measure, how to scientifically measure. Now we are comfortable as RHA, we can go in a given place, we can measure and can bring out results and be sure we have the peace of mind that there will be less questioning about our methodologies out there, about our analysis of information we've collected. And even recently, you've even showed me how to find editors to publish articles on both individual and organization ownership perspectives have been really, really, really improved. The second biggest thing that we've got is knowing when we can carry out a survey, when we can carry out a surveillance. You did a surveillance. Others have done a survey, and it was really on the ground how to make a surveillance. We could see what it could bring out as a result when we come up to realize that the DRC information system was just not working. It was not working. And it's thanks to your presence and Frank on the ground to show us exactly how it works. Columbia was not really selfish because we got 2 invitations to the help courses. Even I remember Leslie has given me even an opportunity to make a presentation to Columbia University students on the logistics in Africa. And that was really, really a good experience. There is also what I used to call my Columbia University mafia. All of you've been spread all over the world. And at any time, I can just give a call. There is someone in a corner to to respond. There's been a lot that we get from on top of even the friendship. Remember, you've connected me to a donor who is giving me $10,000 for over the last 4 years now. And that money is helping the ladies, is helping the children at school. I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot that I've got to me.
And Les, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your philosophy when you were sort of setting up the program with Gang in terms of sending students over, what you hoped that you would put in place, what the students would gain, what RHA would gain, in terms of your position as a professor and a teacher and a mentor who kind of had experience on the ground, but also in academia.
Like with good fiction and romance, like it didn't logically flow out in a planned manner. As Gang said, we had a contract, and in 4 different countries, we measured the violations of UN Resolution 1612. That is, violations of the rights of children in times of conflict. And we did that first in South Kivu. Gang and RHA had just sort of, Gang had just returned, RHA had just been formed. And so it was a natural partnership. In terms of philosophy, I really only had one main philosophy when I tried to push as many students towards Gang as he would take. And that is, in all of the important work I've ever done, some local partner tells me what to do, and I just apply the skills of epidemiology to what they say. For example, in the very first survey we did of mortality in 1999 in Congo, when I was with IRC, this fellow named Charles Labula said, Les, we're missing lots of what you call deaths because they think a stillbirth is what you think is a death. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, in this place in Katana Health Zone, most people don't give their child a name until it's been alive for a couple of days. And if it dies before it's named, then it's a stillbirth. And in other places, if it dies before it's baptized, it's a stillbirth. So we quite quickly changed to asking, has anyone been pregnant this year in the household? How did that pregnancy turn out? And we tripled our neonatal mortality measurement in doing that. And time and time again, local partners have told me how to do something, and all I do is sort of apply the logic of epidemiology or statistics. So that's what I thought students were going to get out of it. In hindsight, I realize there's other bigger things. Smaller things are, for example, they work with Gang, they work with Les. We have completely different skills. I can teach them to drive motorcycles, and Gang can't. Gang can teach them how to stay alive when dealing with corrupt police, and I can't. And so we had just completely complementary and different skills. That was really nice to see how radically different our skills were for these young people who are essentially taking directives from both of us. That part was good in terms of envisioning what team means with local vision and skills. I would not have been able to say in 2010, when the first students went to work with Gang, I would have not been able to say that inequity was the greatest threat to our species. And now I'm quite sure it is. Because now with the information flow, the world is realizing and getting more and more upset with the inequity that exists. And to go and work with an NGO like RHA, where everyone's acutely aware of how the guards need to eat, as well as the high-level staff needs to eat. And in a local NGO, there's much more of a community. Whereas when I go to a UN office in the Central African Republic, there are literally people making 1,000 times more than the guards sitting in those buildings and sleeping in those buildings at night. And that inequity is just completely acceptable in lots of international NGOs that have 2 salary categories for expatriates and non-expatriates. With RHA, you never saw any of that. When you and I did our project in CAR, there was none of that. And I just think seeing that model for our students might have been the most important thing for bringing us to a more peaceful, logical place tomorrow.
And yeah, also as a student, I can say, coming from this kind of very equal, you're all on the same team, you're all part of, trying to accomplish the same goals. It was really surprising to me when then after RHA started working with other NGOs and started saw the division between, people who weren't from the area and the local staff. And it stayed with me, it still sticks with me when I see it. Because I think the way that you and Gang had it set up is really the way that it should have been all along. Looking at the photographs, there was clearly a lot of fun along the way. I think some of my fondest memories are really camping out in a village or in a town after a long day of data collection and enjoying a Primus with Gang. And there was another Congolese staff we worked with, Marius and Jumbo, and we would sit out at the end of the day under the stars. And some of my greatest memories were just sharing stories of the day, learning about DRC, hearing Gang and Les and Marius talk about their past work and their adventures. I remember so many of those stories still today, and they still inspire me. They make me question things. They make me want to try to do things better in humanitarian aid, and they still make me laugh too. So we had some really good times there. I want to thank you, Gang and Les, so much for sharing your stories and your experiences with us in this conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.